My name was Mark. I was 39 years old, and I had returned from the army with nothing but discipline and scars. My parents had forced me out after high school, and college had never been an option. A military contract had been the only road left. Years later I came back, but in their house I was still treated as an outsider. In 3 days they would regret it. But that night, I stood in silence. The living room glowed with Christmas lights strung across the mantel. The air smelled of roasted meat and spiced wine. Laughter spread across the table. Silverware shone. Crystal glasses reflected the flicker of candles. At every seat there were polished plates and folded napkins. At my seat there was only a bare plate, no fork, no knife. A chair without setting. A reminder. A draft pushed through a cracked window behind me. It struck only my back, cutting through my jacket. My boots rubbed raw against my heels after hours of travel. I pressed my fingers against the textured wall, holding myself still. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me move. Robert stepped outside, his voice sharp and loud. Robert said, "Everyone, come closer." Guests rushed to the window. Phones were raised. A clicking sound filled the room. Through the glass we saw headlights sweep across the driveway. The gates opened. A black Mercedes Maybach rolled forward with a giant red bow across the hood. Robert said, "For our Emma." The room erupted in applause. Emma screamed with delight. She jumped forward, tearing the bow away and holding the keys high. The metallic jingle echoed. Cameras flashed again. Emma said, "Finally. My dream." Helen lifted a crystal glass, wiping it with her sleeve before holding it up. Helen said, "Emma brings us pride. And you, just memories." The words cut deeper than the cold. I kept my eyes steady. She walked toward me with a thin envelope. Helen said, "Take this too, Mark." I opened it. Inside were $2. The paper was rough, damp against my fingertips. Uncle said, $2? That's more than he deserves. Cousin said, "Don't worry, Mark. One day you'll get lucky." I replied, "I served for less." No one laughed. The silence that followed was broken only by the chirp of another camera. A family picture was taken without me. I remained near the staircase, the creak of wood beneath my boots mixing with the steady hum of the air conditioner. Emma dangled the Maybach keys, staring at me across the room. Emma said, "Not everyone deserves a Maybach." I looked back and said nothing. I remembered army rations, tasteless and dry. At least they had filled the stomach. Here I was given a plate with nothing. No salt, no bread, no respect. I slid the $2 into my wallet. The bill stuck to my palm, leaving a faint green smear of ink. This was their price for a son. I would keep it. A reminder that debt would be paid. A guest leaned toward another and whispered just loud enough. Guest said, "He looks like a shadow." Nothing more. The words carried. The humiliation was public. Everyone saw it. No one stopped it. I shifted closer to the door. My heel stung where the boot had cut the skin. My shoulder pressed against the cold frame. The metallic handle stung with frost. Outside, the smell of gasoline drifted from the Maybach's exhaust. Through the glass I saw its polished body, perfect paint reflecting the lights from the house. In that reflection I saw myself. Alone. Behind me, in the same reflection, the empty chair at the table. In 3 days the balance would shift. For now I walked out. Morning light cut sharp lines across the dining room wall. Dust floated in the beam, golden at first glance, but gray when it settled on polished wood. The smell of fried bacon and sweet syrup filled the air. Silver forks clinked. Porcelain plates gleamed. Each setting was perfect, except mine. No place. No fork. Just silence. I stood with my back near the window. Cold air leaked through a crack in the frame, settling on my shoulders. My boots pressed into the floor, stiff from yesterday's march across dirty streets. The sting on my heel reminded me that wounds could open in the quietest houses. In 3 days they would regret this performance. But now I watched, still and silent. Emma entered, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. She held the Maybach keys in her hand, spinning them around her finger. The metallic jingle was sharp, deliberate. She wanted everyone to notice. The keys sang louder than words. Emma said, "Listen to this sound. That's success." Her voice pulled attention the way spotlights cut through smoke. Robert folded his newspaper slowly, each crease snapping like a verdict. He kept his eyes on her, not me. Robert said, "Emma, show them the leather seats." Laughter moved through the room like current. Guests leaned closer. Phones rose again. A click. Another flash. A moment stolen. I lifted the cup in my hand. Bitter coffee from 7-Eleven. The cardboard was weak, bending near the seam. Its smell was harsh, burning my nose in contrast to their rich breakfast. Helen said, "Coffee from a gas station? Really, Mark?" I replied. "It keeps me awake." She shook her head, brushing crumbs from the linen cloth. Emma laughed again, louder, spinning the keys until the ring hit her knuckle. Emma said, "This is what family investment looks like." I said nothing. The taste of coffee clung to my tongue. In barracks, coffee was powder and hot water. At least it was free. The table erupted with small jokes. Uncle said, "Mark, maybe you'll get a car too. A used Ford." More laughter. I replied, "Not necessary." A cousin leaned forward, her voice dripping with pity. Cousin said, "At least he has shelter tonight." The chuckle that followed was sharper than the fork she held. My name cut through the air for the first time. Guest said, "Mark should be thankful. At least he's inside." The words pressed harder than the draft. My name, spoken like charity. I tightened my grip on the cup. The heat had cooled, leaving the cardboard soft and wet against my palm. Drops ran down the side, staining the wood beneath me. Gasoline beat stronger than applause. The smell drifted in from the garage, thick, undeniable. Emma rattled the keys one more time, raising them high. Emma said, "Not everyone here deserves luxury." Her smile froze inside another photo. The flash caught her, not me. My boots left no mark on the floor. 10 hours remained until evening. The countdown ticked louder in my head than the clatter of forks. I walked away from the table, each step echoing down the hallway. The tiles carried the sound forward. My shoulder brushed the wall, rough plaster scraping my sleeve. I followed the gasoline smell to the garage. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed. The Maybach stood polished, its bow now folded on the hood like a trophy. 2 men were checking documents near the trunk. One held a clipboard, the metal clip snapping against paper. I stayed hidden by the doorway, listening. Man said, "His name is on the title." The other nodded, closing the folder with a flat sound of paper against metal. Their voices were casual, but the words burned. I stepped back. The cup in my hand sagged, cardboard tearing slightly near the rim. The last of the coffee was cold, bitter on my tongue. Sunday was almost here. And by then, one signature would end their celebration. The line stretched down the corridor, each step measured by the squeak of shoes against tile. Fluorescent lights flickered above, buzzing faintly. The air smelled of paper and ink, mixed with the sour trace of sweat from too many people waiting too long. A sign on the wall blinked red numbers. They called everyone but me. No place. No welcome. Just waiting. In my pocket, I carried a photograph. Army fatigues, desert sand in the background. My own face, younger, thinner, eyes still sharp. The photo was folded, corners worn white from years of rubbing against metal. It was proof that once I had belonged somewhere, even if it was a barracks half a world away. Now I stood here, another man in line, treated like nothing. In barracks, orders came fast. Here, numbers crawled. The clerk behind the counter called out a name. Not mine. A sigh moved down the line, impatient, restless. Someone coughed behind me, the sound harsh in the stale air. Man behind me said, "Move up, soldier boy." I replied, I'm not in your way. The words were flat, controlled. His laugh was sharp, echoing too loud for the narrow space. The folder in my hand felt heavy. Inside were the documents Robert had signed, Emma smiling in every photo that accompanied them. Maybach paperwork. Insurance slips. A single envelope marked with my name. They had placed me on the title. Not as owner, not as reward. As shield. The number board beeped. My turn. I stepped forward, the counter cool against my hand. The clerk smelled of cigarettes and coffee. His fingers tapped the desk, impatient. Clerk said, "Name and age." I replied, "Mark. 39. The words carried weight. My age, spoken aloud, filled the space like a sentence. 39, and standing here as if the years had built nothing. He flipped through the folder. The sound of paper sliding was sharp, relentless. He stopped at the photograph, my face in uniform. He looked up once, then down again, without a word. Another clerk leaned over, whispering just loud enough. Second clerk said, "Soldier boy with a toy." The phrase traveled fast. Someone in the line chuckled. The sound multiplied, moving down the hall. My grip tightened on the counter. I said nothing. The printer hummed, shaking slightly on the desk. The smell of warm ink filled the air. My photographs slid through the feeder, copy, stamped, stored. I remembered nights in desert tents, the canvas flapping against dry wind. Back then, my name had meant survival. Here, it meant paperwork. Clerk said, "Sign here." The pen was cheap, plastic ridges biting into my fingers. I scratched my name, letters flat against the page. Ink spread, blotting the corner. Behind me, footsteps shuffled. Someone whispered again, not even trying to hide. Man said, "Imagine that car in his hands." The laughter rose again, shallow and cruel. I handed back the folder. The clerk stamped it with finality. The thud was heavy, followed by the mechanical click of the seal. The sound echoed. Stamp. Click. End. Sunday was approaching, hours slipping faster. They did not see it. But I did. The red number on the wall changed. My time was finished. The folder slid back across the counter. The clerk smirked faintly, handing it off like trash. My photo stared up at me, copied and filed. My face pressed between ink and paper, a record no one cared to read. The printer spat one last sheet. The smell of ink grew stronger. Stamp. Click. Laughter. That was their verdict. For now. The banquet hall smelled of roses and wine. White cloth draped the tables, glasses arranged in perfect rows. Candles flickered inside tall vases, their light dancing across polished silver. Shoes clicked on marble. Laughter rose like waves, constant and rehearsed. No seat. No invitation. Just space against the wall. Emma glowed in the center, veil draped across her shoulder, Maybach keys tucked inside her purse. She kissed relatives, shook hands with family friends, smiled for endless photos. Cameras clicked again, relentless. Guests leaned forward, whispering her name. I stood at the edge. My back pressed against a pillar, the stone cool and rough beneath my jacket. A draft ran down from the ceiling vent, stirring the scent of perfume with smoke from nearby candles. My boots held dust no one noticed. In 3 days this celebration would look different. But tonight, I was only a shadow. Robert moved through the crowd, shoulders square, hands steady on his phone. He greeted business partners, ignoring me completely. Helen adjusted a vase of lilies, wiping condensation from its glass with a napkin. Their movements were smooth, practiced, the gestures of hosts who knew their roles. Helen said, "Smile wider, Emma. Everyone is watching." Emma said, "I always do." The DJ announced a toast. Glasses lifted. The sound of crystal striking echoed like bells. Emma's new husband kissed her cheek. A cousin leaned near me, his smirk sharp. Cousin said, "Not everyone finds a seat here." I replied, "I don't need one." The smell of roasted beef spread across the room, rich and heavy. Plates clattered as waiters placed dishes before every guest. My hands stayed empty. My table non-existent. I remembered army halls, metal trays slapped down without ceremony. At least then the food had been mine. Here, nothing. A guest with a camera stepped back too far, brushing against me. He glanced, confused. Guest said, "Oh. I didn't know you were here." Then he turned, lens fixed back on Emma. No place. No photo. Just absence. The music rose, violins sharp through speakers. Couples danced, shoes sliding against the floor. I stayed still, pressing my fingers against the edge of the pillar. The stone was cold, biting through skin. Robert approached at last. His tie was loose, his glass full. He stopped just close enough for me to hear, his eyes locked on the floor rather than my face. Robert said, "Stand closer, Mark." I moved forward one step. The crowd did not notice. He placed a folder in my hand, documents inside. DMV papers, insurance forms, more signatures required. The weight was familiar. It felt like deployment orders, heavy with consequence. I replied, "You trust me with this?" Robert said, "You'll sign. Tonight." His voice was flat, the words final. The folder smelled of fresh ink and glue. My fingers traced the edge of the paper, smooth yet sharp. The memory of contracts came back. Long nights in barracks, pens scratching on military lines, signing away years for a paycheck. I had survived deserts, cold barracks, and orders shouted across steel corridors. I had returned with scars. Still, they saw me as a tool. Emma posed for another photo, her veil adjusted by Helen. The camera clicked again, flashed blinding for a second. My reflection caught in the glass behind them, blurred, out of focus, already forgotten. 10 hours until morning. The countdown pressed inside my skull. The band played louder. Robert moved back into the crowd, folder left in my hand. No smile. No thanks. Only expectation. I slid the papers under my arm, feeling their weight like a stone. Guests passed by, offering nods, none speaking my name. One waiter glanced once, eyes flicking toward the folder, then away. He had seen enough to know it mattered. I stayed by the wall, the rough surface against my back, the air vent humming overhead. The smell of roses was too sweet, covering something rotten underneath. Sunday was almost here. Robert's words echoed like a drum. Robert said, "Sign it. Tonight." The dining room glowed again, brighter than before. Crystal chandeliers threw light across the polished floor. Boxes wrapped in gold paper piled near the center table. Ribbons curled like snakes across polished wood. Every eye was on Emma as she unwrapped one gift after another. No balance. No fairness. Just more for her. The smell of perfume mixed with roasted meat and wine. The sound of clinking glasses filled the room, rising above her laughter. Emma held up a diamond bracelet, its stones catching the light. A cheer followed. Cameras flashed again, recording her smile. I stayed back, my chair missing, plate empty. A wallet pressed against my side, thin, holding less than $20. My hands rubbed against the edge of my pocket, fingers spinning something small and metal. An old dog tag. I had carried it since the army. A habit. A reflex. In 3 days the numbers would matter more. But tonight they laughed at mine. Helen said, "Emma deserves it all. She brings us pride." Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. Uncle said, "And Mark? He always had simple taste." Laughter. I replied, "Simple keeps me alive." No one answered. A glass clicked against silver. The music started again. A waiter placed another gift box near Emma. She tore the ribbon, pulling out a velvet case. Inside lay a gold watch. She slipped it on her wrist, raising her arm high. The bracelet and the watch clinked together. More applause. No gift. No gesture. Just silence. I spun the tag faster. The metal bit against my skin, edge cutting faintly. I remembered nights in barracks, the sound of tags clinking as men rolled in their bunks. Sleep never deep, always broken. My hands still moved the same way. Robert leaned across the table, sliding a paper envelope toward Emma. She opened it carefully, unfolding a bank statement. Her smile widened. Robert said, "This is your account now." Emma said, "It feels endless." Her words were loud enough for every guest to hear. Some nodded impressed. Others whispered approval. One man near me raised his brows. Guest said, "You didn't get one, Mark?" I replied, "Not this time." He smirked, eyes dropping to my thin wallet. The smell of roasted meat thickened. My stomach turned. The sound of chewing filled the silence around me. The texture of the tag dug deeper into my palm. 10 hours remained until morning. Emma waved the bank statement again, laughing. Emma said, "Not everyone here can manage money." I looked at her, saying nothing. The waiter returned, this time holding another envelope. He set it before me, confused, unsure. Helen's voice cut sharp. Helen said, "That's not for him. Move it." The waiter hesitated, then pulled it back. His eyes met mine for 1 second before he turned. Social witness. He had seen. No statement. No share. Just erasure. I pulled the tag out, flat in my hand. The letters engraved were scratched, almost unreadable from years of wear. My thumb ran across them, back and forth, steady. The sound was faint but constant, like a clock ticking. I remembered my last deployment. A year in desert heat, pay barely enough to cover debt. I sent checks home, hoping for recognition. Instead, they bought silence. The room roared again as Emma opened another velvet box. A set of keys this time. For a vacation home, they said. She screamed with delight, hugging Robert and Helen. More photos. Another round of clapping. Gasps of approval. Whispers of envy. Silence around me. Sunday was almost here. Robert stood lifting a paper. His voice cut through the noise. Robert said, "Signatures are needed again." He dropped another folder near me. Bank papers. Accounts. Transfers. The weight pressed heavy against the table. I reached for it. The paper was smooth, almost slippery under my fingers. The smell of fresh ink rose. I opened the folder slowly. Numbers filled the page, sharp black against white. My eyes caught one figure, balanced far beyond mine. Emma's name above it. Mine absent. The waiter returned with more glasses, pausing once at my side. He glanced down at the folder, then back at me. He said nothing, but the silence was enough. Another witness. I slid the dog tag back into my pocket, fingers tightening around it. The habit steadied me, as it had in war zones, as it would again. The folder closed with a flat sound. The pages whispered against each other, as they folded back into place. The room carried on, wine poured, laughter high, Emma glowing. But the paper's rustle lingered louder than any toast. Rustle. Whisper. Wait. That was their sound of victory. For now. The room was quieter now. The scent of wine lingered heavy, mixed with burned candle wax. Papers covered the table, stacked in uneven piles. The hum of ventilation rattled above, steady, almost too loud in the silence. No laughter. No applause. Just expectation. Robert placed a leather folder before me. The cover smelled of dust and old glue. He pressed his palm against it, his hand firm, his eyes cold. Robert said, "This is the will." I replied, "Whose decision is inside?" Robert said, "Ours. Not yours." Helen adjusted a silver candlestick, wiping wax from the base. Her bracelets clinked against each other, the sound sharp, deliberate. Emma leaned back in her chair, phone in hand, tapping without looking at me. The folder stayed shut. My fingers hovered above it, the texture rough, the edges worn. My stomach turned with the sour aftertaste of too much wine. 10 hours left until dawn. Emma said, Not everyone deserves to inherit. Her smile was thin, her tone sharper than the knife beside her plate. I replied, not everyone deserves a Maybach. The silence that followed cut deeper than any laugh. The waiter entered, carrying empty glasses on a tray. His eyes fell on the folder, then on me. He hesitated, almost stopped, before Helen snapped her fingers. Helen said, "Take these away. He doesn't need more." The waiter turned, leaving quickly. Another witness. Another silence. I pushed the folder slightly, the paper inside shifting. The smell of ink escaped, metallic, bitter. The memory of contracts flooded back. I remembered signing my enlistment, pen scratching against lines of text that promised years for dollars. Orders screamed across tents. Cold metal beds. No family there. No seat saved. Cousin said, $2 were more than he deserved. His voice carried from across the room. The sound spread, hitting like gravel. No ally. No defense. Just walls around me. Helen finally sat, smoothing her dress, her eyes fixed on Emma. Helen said, "Emma brings us pride. And you, just memories." The words struck harder than the cousin's sarcasm. She didn't even raise her voice. The folder remained closed. My hand stayed still above it. My other hand reached into my pocket, fingers tightening on the dog tag again. The metal was cold, familiar, steady. Sunday was almost here. Robert leaned closer, his breath carrying the scent of whiskey. His hand tapped the folder once, sharp, like a gavel. Robert said, "Sign when told." Nothing more. The vent hummed louder, blowing a draft straight onto me. My jacket did little against the chill. My boots scraped the stone floor as I shifted slightly, the sound loud in the quiet room. Emma lifted her phone, snapping a photo of herself with Helen. Their laughter was soft, private, cutting. No frame. No photo. Just absence again. I remembered long nights without sleep. Bunk beds shaking from restless men. Silence too heavy, broken by snores or coughs. I thought I had left that behind. Instead, I had carried it with me, barracks in my head, barracks in their home. The waiter returned, this time slower. His eyes touched mine before he turned away. He set new glasses on the table, the sound faint but clear. He lingered 1 second too long, then left. Witness again. Silence again. Helen slid the folder closer to me. The leather scratched against the table. Helen said, "He wasn't supposed to know." Her voice was low, almost careless, but the words landed with precision. The folder sat before me. The will waited inside. The draft blew stronger, the vent rattling overhead. My hand stayed steady on the tag in my pocket, the edge cutting into my palm. Rustle. Chill. Silence. That was their plan. For now. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and dust. The air carried faint perfume from strangers mixed with stale coffee. Shoes scuffed against the stone floor as people settled into benches. The clock above the judge's bench ticked, each second louder than the last. No celebration. No laughter. Just judgment. I stood at the front table. My jacket felt heavy, shoulders stiff. Papers were stacked neatly before me, clipped together with metal fasteners. The pen beside them gleamed under the fluorescent light. A bailiff's voice broke the silence. Bailiff said, "All rise." Everyone stood. The scrape of benches echoed. The judge entered, robe flowing, eyes stern. His gavel tapped once, the sound sharp, commanding. 3 days had passed. Their Sunday had come. Helen sat 2 rows behind me. Robert leaned forward beside her, face pale, jaw clenched. Emma tapped her phone again, but slower this time. Their lawyer whispered to them, his papers shaking faintly in his hands. I placed my wallet on the table. The same wallet that still held 2 sticky dollar bills. They had not dried in months. No gifts. No keys. Just proof. The judge cleared his throat. Judge said, "State your name for the record." I replied, "Mark Daniel Harris. Age 39. Former Staff Sergeant, United States Army. The room shifted. The titles carried weight. Silence grew heavier. The lawyer from my family rose. His voice tried to steady itself. He said, "Your Honor, the accounts, the properties, the vehicles, all belong to Emma." I replied, "The documents show my name." I slid a folder across the table. The paper rasped against the wood, dry and loud. The judge leaned forward, scanning the lines. His pen tapped against the desk. Sunday was here. Emma finally lifted her head, eyes narrowing. Emma said, "Not everyone deserves a Maybach." Her voice cracked at the end. I replied, "Not everyone deserves my silence." Helen's bracelet clinked against the bench. Robert rubbed his palm against his thigh, restless. Their lawyer stammered. He said, This is harassment. These signatures mean nothing." The judge raised his hand. Silence fell again. He spoke slowly, words deliberate. Judge said, "The court recognizes the evidence. The assets remain under Mark Daniel Harris." No applause. No gasps. Just the weight of truth. The dog tag pressed against my thigh inside my pocket. My fingers turned at once, steadying my breath. 10 hours of night had passed. The morning was mine. I reached for the pen. Its metal was cold, slick between my fingers. The tip hovered above the line. The sound of ventilation filled the silence, steady, constant. The paper beneath my hand felt rough, each fiber catching against my skin. I signed once. Then again. The ink spread dark, final. Rustle. Scratch. End. I placed the pen down, its click louder than their whispers. The judge nodded, gavel striking once more. It was finished. Judge said, "This session is adjourned." Chairs scraped back. People stood. I remained seated. My hand rested on the wallet, the corner of the $2 sticking out. My reflection shone faintly in the pen beside it. They had given me nothing. I had taken everything back. Subscribe if you want more stories about real men who don't scream. They act. Coldly? To the end?